Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone is doing great today. My name is Valentina Kova. I am the communications manager here at Ontario One Call, and I'm very proud to welcome you to our quarterly compliance and industry performance webinar today. We have a very packed agenda that includes locate performance insights, a fantastic panelist discussion, and a sneak peek on our upcoming safety awards. So while we wait a couple more minutes while everybody join us, I would like to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and we will be posting it on our website and YouTube channel in the next couple of days. You're also welcome to send us your questions using the Q&A button at the top of your screen. You can do that at any point during our presentation. We will answer some some questions right after our panel discussions and more general questions at the end of all presentations. Um, Also, you're welcome to use our email address compliance@ontarioonecall.ca in case we cannot go over all the questions at this time. We won't be able to answer specific scenario-based questions during the webinar because every situation is different and it may only affect a small group of people, but please do use the email to submit that. Our compliance team is always very helpful and we'll be happy to help you. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to welcome our very first presenter and panelist, Ryan McAfee, Director of Compliance and Industry Performance. Ryan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Really appreciate the introduction. Yes, I'm Ryan McAfee, the head of compliance here at Ontario One Call. Today is our year-end webinar. I can't believe I've been saying this week that we've been having year-end things. It is also our first virtual meeting since June. And you might be asking yourselves, were these webinars not supposed to be quarterly? Well, compared to 2023 and 2024, we did something a little bit different. This year we had our fall webinar was actually, we decided to do it in person at Ontario One Call's first ever annual meeting and trade show, but not to worry, if you missed the September session, two of our panelists have returned to continue the conversation, and more on that in a moment. And let me start by saying thank you to Valentina Kova, our communications manager, who's just set us off today, who is a permanent fixture in our webinars, and also to Isabella Ahaji, our investigations coordinator, who are both working in the background to make sure that panelists and presenters and guests are supported, and without who webinars like this just wouldn't happen. Now, Valentina presented or talked about the agenda in some detail. So, yeah, in a moment, I'll be handing the mic over to Corey Officer, our Supervisor of Compliance and Industry Performance, or CAPE. And yeah, we're going to spend the most time today in the panel discussion. Continuing off from where we left off in September, we're privileged to have guest panelists, Nadia Todorova, the Executive Director of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario, and Rob Bowen, the Supervisor of Inspections and Support over at Utilities Kingston, join us to share their valuable thoughts and insights. So looking forward to spending the bulk of our time there. And then, of course, as Valentina mentioned, Jean Lepin, our Chief Strategy Officer, will be joining us to talk about some awards. And then, as usual, we'll wrap up our time together with a Q&A. But before all of that, something I want to say is that as the part of our maturing here at Ontario One Call into our regulatory function means having a renewed and expanding emphasis on safety. So moving forward, you can expect CAPE webinars to include a safety moment. So allow me to introduce Lucas Young, Ontario One Call's Human Resources Generalist, to provide this series' first ever safety moment. Welcome, Lucas.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ryan.
I'm going to try to keep up with you driving the slides here, so please don't be afraid to urge me along.
All right, wonderful. So if the timing's off, I'll just make sure to blame you and we'll move on from there.
Perfect.
Welcome to the first health and safety moment. This one's focused on winter driving as the snow is about to come, so it's important to stay prepared ahead of time. So moving on to the next slide. Perfect. Just like most things, health and safety, the most important thing is to prepare before you actually go out and do the thing. So first things first, make sure your phone is charged before you go on any long drives, because that's going to be how you contact emergency services in case you need them. But at the same time, it is never more important to keep your phone out of your hand than when you're driving in icy conditions. Take some time before you go out on the road to make sure you fully clear your car off of any snow. Make sure you fully clear all your windows, but also make sure that you are clearing off your lights so that other people can see you coming at the same time. Also very important, keep emergency supplies on hand, things like blankets, flashlights, excess chargers, anything else that you can keep in your trunk that might help you out in an emergency situation. And then make sure to keep your car prepared as well. So that means make sure you have your winter tires on, make sure you have more than enough gas to get to where you're going to in case you need to make a detour, and give your battery regular checks to make sure that that's fully charged. While you're actually on the road, make sure you're practicing safe braking, which means expect to slide, brake a little bit farther out than you have to, just in case you slide, you don't bump into the person ahead of you. Always stay slow. Anticipate that you're going to be late to get into where you're going. It is much more important to get there safely than it is to get there quickly. Anticipate that other folks will be driving slow on icy roads, and make sure you don't feel the need to speed up to cover those delays. Cruise control is helpful and it is very nice when you're on those long drives. However, it can sometimes cause folks to kind of decrease their own personal control of the car. So when you can on those long icy drives, make sure don't use cruise control. Instead, keep the car under your control. And then hills are the most difficult part of driving in the ice, as always. Make sure don't spin out on the hills. If you've got a big hill to get over, give yourself some room, back up, and then get a running start. Otherwise, you could end up getting stuck on the hill and sliding backwards into traffic, which is not a good time. Now, on the unfortunate case of an emergency where you might be stranded on the side of the road, make sure you stay with your vehicle. It might be tempting to kind of get out of your car and go look for help. However, the safest place will be with your vehicle, contacting emergency services and waiting for folks to come help to you. It's been a lot of trouble, folks getting out of their car to look for help and then getting into more trouble being on the side of the road, possibly in the dark or in a snowstorm. Make sure you're calling for help. Don't feel the need to overdig. Otherwise, you could accidentally cause yourself a medical emergency when you're already in a separate emergency. And again, like I mentioned before, have an emergency kit in the back of your car. These are some items that you can keep in there. Most important thing is something to keep yourself warm, charge your phone in case you need it, and then traction aids like kitty litter, salt, sand, anything that can get you a little bit of grip to get out of those blockages if you're in an unfortunate position of being stuck on the side of the road. And that's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Lucas, thank you very much for that. That was really a great way to kick off our safety moments for compliance webinars. So I appreciate that. Hopefully next time we can have you next year to talk about maybe some EVs and not just internal combustion engine specific. Joking, of course. Thank you for that, Lucas. Very good. I'll ask Corey Officer to join us next to present on industry performance and complaints. Corey, welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm going to jump right in. We have lots to talk about. So during this section of the webinar, I'll be focusing on complaint and sector data, industry performance, and then we'll dive into the panel discussion with Rob and Nadia. Rather than diving into each slide in detail, I'll just be focusing on highlights. So in 2024, complaints were down, way down, a trend that we've been reporting on for the past couple webinars for this year. So in terms of complaint data, I'd like to focus your attention on the bottom half of this, this table. For the January to October. In this period, we received about just under 900 complaints, 73% of which were about late locates. So this is a far cry from the same period last year, where we had more than 1,000 complaints than what we have this year, as well as 2022, when we actually had 3 times more the complaints. The proportion of complaints that involve late locates have also dropped from 98% in 2022 to 73% this year. While late locates are still the lion's share of the complaints that we receive, there's a shift to complaints about public safety, which is digging without locates or digging unsafely in the data set. So basically, put another way, this year our cases have become far more complex and more increasingly centered around public safety instead of timeliness alone. Next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on this slide other than to remind the group that last time I reported the spike in complaints for telecoms this year. This was attributed to a single UIO who had a poorly performing locate service provider. We've seen great improvements with gas, electrical, and municipal sectors. Sorry. Next slide. Okay, I'd like to spend some time on this section because it's integral to the work that we do as a public safety administrative authority. So for the year-to-date locate performance member perspective from January to September of this year, you can see on the chart on the left there, member perspective, this measures the time it takes for each individual locate service, or not locate service provider, sorry, UIO, or in turn their locate service provider, to complete a locate. Whereas on the opposite side is the excavator perspective, and that is how long it takes for a complete locate package to be completed. So typically on an individual basis with the member perspective, it's going to show a higher percentage of on time, whereas because there's usually 5 or 6 UIOs on each locate package, it then the on time kind of lags a little bit, and therefore that's why you're seeing 95% for the member perspective and 85% for the excavator perspective. So UIOs completed, yep, 85% on time. The total notifications for the same period last year was just shy of 3 million notifications. Next slide, please, Ryan. So as we know, the busy dig season doesn't square neatly into fiscal quarters, so we've decided to make a slide specifically for dig season. Something else to note is that as of May 1st was the new regulation for specified locates, so it added that timeline of an extra 5 days for UIOs to complete locates on multiple civics. So starting with the member perspective on the left, we're seeing 96% on time. Total notifications were 1.7 million. And this in contrast to last year, we were 86% on time with the total notifications of 1.9 million. Over to the excavator perspective, we're sitting at 89% during peak season, whereas last year we were at 72.4% with a total request volume of 493,000. So in conclusion, during the busy season, locates were completed faster than previous years. Locate packages were completed on time, not just 85% on time, but 89% during peak season. Each incomplete locate, though, represents a project that cannot start, representing a financial impact on excavators and project owners throughout the province. For context, when comparing to the same period last year. It's important to remember that in 2024, APs were reintroduced, and like I said, the 10-day timeline for multiple civics was on May 1st as well. So now I'm going to pass it over to Ryan to get the panel started.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Corey. Just before we move on, I'm going to keep this slide up for a moment because I wanted to give credit where it's due. So we have seen a lot of improvement. Just in Corey's summary, we see there's been a major improvement in performance in 2024 compared to 2023 and honestly in previous years as well. So, at the risk of being self-congratulatory, I want to make sure that we give kudos where they're due because this success is a sector success. So for those of you who have increased your staffing, who have taken your locate provisions more seriously, who have put more thought and attention into doing this work, doing your locate function well in order to get excavators up and running. Thank you. Well done, and your efforts show. So let's now move on to where we'll be spending most of our time today. Looks like we're doing all right for time. So, as I mentioned, this is the continuation of the panel discussion we had during our trade show back in September. Now, unfortunately, our colleagues from ProMark were not able to attend today, but I'm sure we'll have them join us again in a future engagement. So I'd like to welcome Nadia and Rob, but why don't I hand off the mics to you to introduce yourselves, and let's start with Nadia. Nadia, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadia Todorova, and I am the Executive Director of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario, or RCCAO for short. And we are a unique labor and management association that represents the men and women who are building the critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, wastewater, and housing in the province. So I'm representing kind of the excavator and the contractor side of this critical issue, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. And thank you for having me back again.
Thank you, Nadia. We're really excited to have you. And Rob, over to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Bowen. I'm the Supervisor of Inspection Support at Utilities Kingston. I've been a part of Utilities Kingston now for just shy of 18 years. I was part of the engineering department my entire life, and my entire career, and I've been part of the construction sector and locating in particular for about 20 years now. So lots of perspective to offer from the infrastructure owner as well as the LSP here today. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Rob, welcome. And I'd mentioned that the last time we had ProMark attending, who represented the locators, a critical part in our regulated community, but Utilities Kingston also does locate. So looking forward to some of your perspective on that as well.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we locates infrastructure owner and contractor, really. So it's an interesting perspective we can offer.
Well, we're glad to have you, Rob. So thanks for joining. So I'm going to say something that I said last time in September, that it's okay to disagree. The object of today is to have some candid conversations. And, with integrity and with honesty, we can move forward together. That's part of being modern in our approach. So here's how it'll work. I'll ask the panelists questions, and while we discuss our various perspectives, please feel free to ask a question using the chat function, and Isabella and Valentina behind the scenes will capture your questions and ask them to the panelists before we move on to the next question. However, if the topics that we're discussing aren't quite what you're interested in asking, I'd ask you to hold those questions until the Q&A right at the end of the call, so we can keep the sections, so we can keep on track in each of the sections. So with that,
Ryan.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I just
No
want to
worries.
clarify to please use the Q&A function, not the chat, to ask questions. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Valentina. Okay, so our first question for our panelist, this one goes to Rob, but anyone's welcome to join in, is locate timeliness. Rob, do you agree, somewhat agree? Are you neutral with the following statement? Leadership can influence improvements when it comes to locate timeliness.
If there was a strongly agree button here, Ryan, I would probably take that one. In fact, I would actually double down and say that without the endorsement from leadership, this may actually regress in your effort. This is something that needs to be sort of integral or inherent in any sort of excavation business. And to give you some examples of what I mean by influence, so in September, as Ryan's alluded to, we had the conference, the first annual one called Conference and Trade Show. We got up as panelists and we talked about this issue. Here we are today. A few of us have been lucky enough to be invited to the ministry, all on, spearheaded by One Call, our regulator. So it's been that alone shows you how much they take this seriously, but they're also not just posting the rules on a board and expecting you to follow and comply. They're to work with us and they go through that. So I think that that's a very positive effort. With my own senior leadership team, in particular, my director and my CEO, and trusting myself and my team to take this serious. They're not as familiar with this world, and so they allow us the freedom to think innovatively and take on these issues, slice them up any which way we can. For my small part with this, I kind of operate within our team as I evaluate potential solutions. We try to implement them, evaluate, and then re-implement. Sort of the trial by fire, and also get better each time we go through in an iterative approach. And then I look at my team themselves, in particular my coordinator Jonathan. They come every day to work. They take this very seriously. They have real conversations with contractors and the public. They try to show people how important this is and why it's important. And if you work with us, things will improve. And so all of those things combined, I really believe that leadership does positively or negatively influence locate timeliness.
So Rob, I'll ask our other panelists if they would like to add a few thoughts here before we move on to the audience questions. Nadia or Corey, anything additional to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree with Rob in terms of I think leadership and a top-down approach is really helpful when it comes to this policy issue. Because it is an intricate issue. There's so many moving parts to it. There's so many different stakeholders. So it's important to kind of have that top-down approach. But I think when we're speaking about leadership, I think there needs to be a significant acknowledgement for Minister McCarthy, Premier Ford, and this government for making really meaningful and necessary and long overdue changes to the locate process over the last few years. I think there have been some substantial improvements and changes to the locates process. For example, Bill 93, the Getting Ontario Connected Act in 2022, and more recently, the legislation around the fact that there'll be no cost for delivery locates and relocates in Ontario. I think the government has really done a good job of focusing on this issue and improving upon it. Because there's a deep understanding of how important locate delivery is to building infrastructure in Ontario, building housing in Ontario, and making sure that that process is really predictable and really answers the calls that are necessary on the ground. So I just wanted to make sure that we have that as part of the conversation as well.
Well, Nadia, we're supposed to disagree because it's more interesting for the people who have logged into the webinar. But I think we're actually very aligned here, and so I want to touch on the compliance support pilot for a moment, because it was a presentation, our webinar that we did very early in 2024, and that pilot's still ongoing. We'll do a proper debrief with the sector once that's fully wrapped up in 2025. But Rob, I'm interested in your thoughts here, because I'll tell you that we tried to recruit into the compliance support program underground infrastructure owners whose compliance wasn't great. And then we got volunteers whose compliance, when it comes to locate timeliness, was actually really great. So calling it a compliance support pilot now feels like it doesn't have the right tone. But Rob, you're one of the volunteers in the compliance support program, and I know that I've talked about this publicly before, but my hope was that having a line of sight from executive and senior leadership and the people who are really making decisions on the ground, like yourself and your colleagues, Rob, that we would see a improvement in locate performance, and we have. So without plugging compliance support, because it's a pilot, because the pilot's underway, how has the compliance support pilot really changed anything that you're doing in your day-to-day with your team? Has it added more Has it added more line of sight? Has it added any more accountability? What are your thoughts?
Huh. That's an interesting one, right? So when we initially signed up, I think we really wanted to be in volunteer. We really wanted to hear what you had to say. It was pilot, as you described, so we were kind of we were wondering what this might look like, what that support was going to be offered. At one point, we sort of thought that maybe we would somehow be the people offering support. So we were really confused for a bit, to be honest. But then we started going through the process. We had created a document on how we deliver locates and how we intend to deliver locates. And that was actually an excellent exercise because we put pen to paper of what we struggle with, how we plan, like what our planned solutions are and potential efficiencies throughout that. And it was, and then, you kind of, there's these long pauses between check-ins with one call and yourself, and so we're on the ground doing different things every day, and so we don't really know how we're doing all the time. We probably could look it up easily, but so it's really nice from that perspective to have a meeting with you and your staff and then have them tell us that, oh yeah, you guys have done really well this year. It's like, great. So I think it's nice. It validates all the things that we tried to do, because you don't know at the time when you're making these decisions. We have a very unique model. We have 5 locators and between 7 and 10,000 locate requests per year. So, because we're rate based, because we're also an LSP, an infrastructure owner, municipality contract, we have to get around this problem differently. And we can't just throw money out. We can't just bring locators in. So I think what was sort of overall the takeaway would be this made us really think outside the box on how we could solve some of our own issues within it. So anyway, that would be my perspective.
Well, you may not see your performance on the day-to-day, but let me say that you and your team should be proud, because there's been a lot of improvement. And let me just say, I think that's come down to a number of things, but also leadership. So having that, so taking these issues seriously and pushing ahead has been really beneficial, I think, for the sector, but also for, frankly, Ontario One Call, to learn from infrastructure owners like yourselves. So, what works, what doesn't, and what's worth investing in. But I think I'll pause there and ask Valentina and Isabella, do we have any questions on this topic before we move on?
We just had one question come in, Ryan.
Yes.
So what role does the UIO internal locate conflicts clearance process play in the timelines of locates delivery? In other words, does the UIO conflicts clearance play into the 5 or 10-day completed locates delivery timeline?
I think that would be a perfect question for Corey to get us started with.
Sorry, I heard the question, but I'm just going to read it. Sorry. What could we'll get back to that person if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah,
So, we do have a question coming up on renegotiation, so perhaps we can get into it a little bit more then. If not, we can come back to that question at the end of the call. All right. Let us move on to the next question. Oh, and this is not a question I'm asking. This is a question that Nadia is asking.
Okay, so I'm really excited to see kind of where the discussion goes on this question. So I will pose it to you, Ryan, and we can begin, and then we can maybe open it up to others. So in terms of how important are administrative penalties to public safety in our construction and locating ecosystem?
Okay, so the uncomfortable part is starting now. Thank you for that. Yeah, so as we're wrapping up the year, I've been saying in some of the meetings that we've been having internally that I've been with Ontario One Call for nearly 2 years, and one of my jobs when I was hired was to implement the administrative penalty regulation. And when I think back to 2 years ago, there was a great deal of frustration, I would say, that was felt internally and externally. I would say that the frustration internally was that Ontario One Call didn't have the tools that it needed to do its job well, especially when it meant holding parties to account. And then from the sector, as we were engaging, I heard, time and time again, one call, why can't you do something about a situation like this or that? And we did have, in fairness, we did have some tools under the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, which we've talked about in previous calls or in previous webinars. But I would say APs have been very important. Thinking about the presentation that Corey had talking about locate performance, APs have been a part of that. To what degree? Not quite sure. I think it's fair to say we have not enforced our way into better locate performance across the sector, that there's been a lot of parties, including infrastructure owners and locators on their behalf, who have really taken this issue seriously and improved it. So very important. It is a tool that we need to administer with integrity. And something that the audience may not be entirely aware of, although we've mentioned it before, is that every administrative penalty that Ontario One Call issues is posted on our website. So if you, I'm not sure if we can get the link to the enforcement activities website in the chat section, but otherwise you can Google Ontario One Call enforcement activities. So every administrative penalty that we issue, except for the ones that are in appeal, must be posted there. That's one of our requirements under the Act for One Call to be compliant. So that was a long-winded way of saying, Nadia, very important.
I completely agree with you, Ryan. I think agree they're very important. From our perspective, they bring tension and accountability into the system, and to help provide excavators with the one thing that we have always wanted, which is predictable delivery of locates. And again, I've talked about this before, but predictability really ensures that there are less project delays, which means that there's less risk, there's less cost, and there's just a smoother, more predictable project management process altogether. And if a project is delayed due to the delayed delivery of locate, crews are just forced to sit idly by because we don't dig without locates. And contractors are just forced to add that standby time to the overall project cost, which is paid from the public purse. So when you have clear and enforceable accountability in the system, it's positive. It really is an incentive to stick to those legislated timeframes. And when you have a mechanism to enforce those legislated timeframes, there are going to be less project delays, there's going to be less risk, and there's ultimately going to be less cost. And again, that just leads to more predictable and smoother project management process. So that is why this issue has been so important to us, and that's why we've advocated it for so long, and we'll continue to focus on it. And we hope to continue to kind of see this positive momentum in terms of the delivery time frames being more predictable and just being more confident, making contractors more confident with planning of the project work.
So the predictable versus timeliness is something that I really want to touch on our next question as well, but I'm glad you mentioned it this time around, Nadia. But I know that Corey had some thoughts on the approach that Ontario One Call has taken sort of year one in implementing the administrative penalty regulation. So Corey, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. So the administrative penalty regulation came into force May 1st. And so in our first year, we decided to take a more of a reactive approach. So primarily addressing complaints as they arise. In the previous slides that I presented on, we had roughly 900 valid complaints, and we've conducted over 140 formal investigations this year. So we've actually issued, I believe, around 24 administrative penalties so far this year. They range from late locates to dedicated locator contraventions and excavation without locates as well. So we have like a plethora of cases that made it to an administrative penalty. One thing that I wanted to mention, Ryan did mention the enforcement activity page. Also on our website under the compliance and industry performance section is our administrative penalty regulation, as well as our internal policy. So you can actually review those. We encourage you to stay informed and read those documents. But going forward into 2025, we plan on taking not just a reactive approach, but progressively becoming more proactive with how we handle non-compliance within the industry. So, and that how we could be proactive, or how we plan to be proactive, sorry, would be, you know, a UIO's updating 360 feedback. That is a requirement under the Act to report back to Ontario One Call on their locate delivery performance, as well as the misuse of the renegotiation function. So ensuring that renegotiations are valid and occurring necessary. So that's it for me. Thank you.
I'm really interested to hear the audience's questions and thoughts here. But first, I want to hand over to Rob, because Rob, is both an infrastructure owner and a locator, I bet the administrative penalty regulation, when it was coming into force, it was impending. I bet that influenced some of your thinking as an infrastructure owner.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that this was a non-issue, but yes, it's become very important. I think to your point, when it first came out, and I can't remember if it was late 2022 or early 2023, where the idea was sort of dropped and it became a very real thing. There was a lot of panic. We try to do a good job. We try not to get in anybody's way, but I mean, now all of a sudden we're you know, frankly, we're providing an at no cost service that's now going to be penalized, which is already heavily, you know, scrutinized to begin with the legislation. So we were a little concerned on how that was going to work out. As I mentioned earlier, we were invited to some ministry meetings. We talked about this. We talked about this with One Call, other UIOs, other LSPs, and then I think there was a really good effort made. I remember Jim Keach talking about, you know, we don't want to just throw money at this problem. Maybe we should actually look at how we could do this differently. And we had a whole bunch of people come to the table. And I thought that was great, because that's that part about thinking outside the box that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, honestly, this is part of the way to get your leaders to pay attention. I was in those rooms with a bunch of people that had never seen a locator before, never seen paint on the ground, but they were in charge of the areas with respect to their municipality. So as I say, that you get leaders to pay attention, influence starts to trickle downhill. So yes, these are very important, I think, to get people to at least reevaluate how they conduct their locates, and then try to do their best to find efficiencies and be on top. That would be my perspective.
You know, I didn't think that we're going to loop back to the leadership question, but it is a natural connection there. There's that leadership piece that influences performance. What I would say is that, you know, something that we don't talk about a lot is, you know, as the public safety authority, administrative authority in this space, is that we want to do this work very well too. So we ought to talk about integrity and the policy mechanisms that we have. But we've also talked about risk, and so we have a risk tool that we use that guides the decision makers of our assessors, our investigators who are appointed as assessors. So we always have an eye to that. We always want to make sure that the risk tool is driving the right behaviors internally as well. So, you know, something that I think our early successes when it comes to making risk-based decisions is that, and there is no way to predict this because, like I said, we don't have quotas when it comes to administrative penalties. It's a tool to use in the right circumstances. So when our first administrative penalty was for a public safety issue, and then we start to see a DL issue and then timeliness come up, it felt like the tool is helping our assessors make the right decisions in the circumstances. So it's something that we have to keep an eye on when it comes to risk matrices. I've learned from our expert that these tend to be living documents. We have to keep an eye on them. We have to make adjustments as the circumstances in the sector change. But I would say so far so good. I'm quite pleased with how this is rolled out. But over to Isabella.
Sorry,
and
can I just
sure,
add something, Ryan, if
of
that's
course.
okay? I just want to reiterate too that there's no such thing as automatic APs. That's something that is a big misconception. When the investigative team is reviewing cases or complaints and investigating, to get to an administrative penalty is quite a process, and it would never be a surprise to a UIO or an excavator that they would eventually be receiving an administrative penalty, because there is a lot of communication that goes on between when we receive the complaint, investigate, and then issue an order. So it's very, the timeline is quite long, and there's a lot of opportunity to discuss and provide your side. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because
Yeah,
it's big.
something to keep in mind though is that we've also seen our first repetitions of contraventions as well. So where we've seen multiple administrative penalties issued for the same non-compliance, where a party hasn't yet achieved compliance. So we're learning and growing. But let's hear what the participants have to say. So Isabella and Valentina, do we have questions from the audience on this topic? Oh.
You're muted, Isabella.
So we have an interesting question here.
Yeah.
So do you think the largest factor in locate timelines improvement was the administrative penalties or something else?
I was just going to answer no. However, I think we'll put this to our panelists first. Who'd like to start?
Yeah, I can start. So I agree. I don't think it's just one thing, and this kind of loops back to my earlier comments that locates is a complicated issue. There's no silver bullet. There's no one specific thing that's going to make everything better. So I think the improved performance that we're seeing is due to a few things, including AMPs, but it's also due to the fact that, the volume of locates this year has been significantly reduced because of the slowdown in residential. I would say the volume of locate requests is probably about 20 to 30% down, just because work has been kind of slower, especially on the residential side. But I think there was, again, to my earlier comments, I think there were other regulations and policies that have been in place that have helped to manage the locate ecosystem. The validity period for locates has been improved, which is great. I know there's been some effort in terms of improving the sharing of locates on site between GCs and subs. So I think that has also helped. So I think there have been a number of very important elements that have come together over the last year to really lead to this improvement of locate timeliness that we're seeing. But it will be interesting to see whether next year or the year after that, when things kind of go back to earlier, like 2022 levels of building, especially in the residential side, if that trend will continue. And I think that's going to be the true test in terms of how well the system is working. If and when the locate volumes return to that 2022, 2021 levels, and what the actual performance is then.
Yeah, I agree. I think 2025 is going to be an important year for us to take a critical look at our trends, and also let's not forget the economy, where building projects have faced higher interest rates, especially early on in the year. These have all been factors. But my initial no is that it is not meant to diminish the importance of the administrative penalty regulation, because it does have its place. It's been an important tool for us to have, but mainly to make sure that the emphasis is on the right place. And infrastructure owners have done a lot of work to get to that 90% plus in order to get projects working on time. So I think I'll move us on to our next question, just being cognizant of time. We're at a quarter to noon here, so I'll move on to our final question for the panel. And this one's for Rob, and I get to ask this one again. So contracting out obligations. I know we spent more time on this, Rob, during the trade show than we've had chance to today. But to what degree do you agree with the statement, renegotiations can improve efficiency?
So I feel like Nadia's going to disagree with me here, but I do think that I'm in the somewhat agree camp. And the reason is, again, our model is such that we can't throw extra people at this problem as easily as we would like to. So renegotiations, like alternate locate agreements or ALAs, are tools. They're tools that we can utilize to try to deliver these things on time. I think what's one of the things I try to influence my team to think like is to put take a legislative and a legal, take that, all that, throw it away, and think of it, all of this locating thing as a customer service, put it with a customer service lens. And what an element of customer service is managing your customers' expectations. So I think if you bought I'll just use my example. I bought a dryer from a big box store. So you go through the online portal, you get everything ready to go and pay submit. And right before you hit pay, it tells you, like, you're not getting this tomorrow. You're getting this in 2.5 weeks. Do you still want it? So I don't want it then, of course, but you know what? I know now the date I'm getting it, and I'm willing to accept that. Let's rock and roll. So I think that's where renegotiations are excellent. My team is trained to look ahead at their queue or their bunk that they have, there's built up locates. And they have a very particular priority system. We prioritize the 10-dayer and the project work first, because we know that they are the least flexible with respect to their timelines. So we don't want to get in the constructor or an excavator's way at all. And it's more likely that a single homeowner who's putting in a fence or backyard garden is going to be more flexible to move their date. So we look to try to get these people, if we see that, Friday, maybe it's Tuesday or Wednesday, and we see Friday we got quite a ticket load building, and we go, look, we're not going to get to everybody by the end of this week. So that's when my team has been tasked with, give these folks a call, start these renegotiation processes, see where there's some flexibility. I think what's important for everyone listening to understand with the renegotiation process is, once you take it out of the ticket request area into a renegotiated ticket, it now becomes an appointment. So you can't miss that. So I think it's really important, because these things are tools that we can utilize as an LSP, as an infrastructure owner, to manage expectations of our customers, but still deliver locates, even though they're not technically within that 5-day window or whatever. So that would be my answer here, Ryan.
I think I'll hand over to Nadia, because I'm sure Nadia has a perspective on this. But first, I think what I'd say is that and the control for that, Rob, is that excavators don't need to agree, right? So if an infrastructure owner wishes to renegotiate and the excavator doesn't agree, it's not renegotiated. The initial timeline sticks. But Utilities Kingston has had excellent performance this year, so I think that's worked into your processes. But I'll move on to Nadia.
Sure. Yeah. So I have some thoughts on this, and I guess my response on the question, when you ask, renegotiations can improve efficiency, I would say efficiency for who? Because from a contractor and excavator standpoint, it's not quite as efficient. I think, again, to my earlier point, what will create efficiency for contractors and excavators really is that fast and predictable locates. Because if we have those fast and predictable locates, and everybody trusts that we can get them when we get them in that time period that we're supposed to, then they would only call in for what they need when they need it. So I think the fact that, there's still renegotiations happening, and they are happening to a large extent, and from what I've heard, it is still a bit of an issue. Contractors and excavators are calling in what they need, and they're getting calls back, like Rob said, do you really need this much? Can you do with X, Y, Z? And excavators usually say yes. One, because they just want to get going, and because they don't want to sit idly by, but also because it's a relationship-based situation, right? And you want to go along to get along, type of thing. So you take what you can get, but then you say, well, I'll have to call you again, and I'll need more and more and more and more. So I think the goal really should be, we should get away from renegotiations as much as possible. Of course, there's instances where they're necessary, and we understand that. But I think the more that we can get away from them, the better it would be, because it'll just reflect that the system that we have in place is working well, and it's working well for everyone. And then further to that, and I know we've had some conversations around with you and your team, from a data standpoint, how do renegotiations get captured, right? Do they muddy the water to a certain extent? Because how are they being captured once, a new scope of work and a new date is being renegotiated? How is it being analyzed, right? Like, did we have a renegotiation, to use Rob's example, because there's just supply chain challenges and my dryer will just not get here on time? Or, is there weather, whatever the case might be. So I think the more data that you have and the clearer the data is, the more you can craft a policy that really represents the realities of the situation. So yeah, I guess this is one that we're not going to agree on, but again, I think there's a time and a place for it, and it really needs to be used, I think, sparingly from our side.
Finally, we disagree. We disagree on something, but it's an important discussion to have, and I'd like Corey's thoughts on this because I know that Corey's spent some time looking at renegotiations, especially recently. But one of the reasons that it's important to have panels, or it's helpful to have panels like this, is that as the public safety administrative authority here, you know, in conversations about what's more important, timeliness or predictability. Well, timeliness is in our statute, so we know how important that is. So it's good to have different views here and get those out so the sector knows that we're listening and you're being heard. Corey, what are your thoughts on renegotiations?
Yeah. So when I started with compliance in 2020, the renegotiation rate was at 39%. So over 1 in every 3 locate requests were actually being renegotiated in our system. And then with a lot of work from our leadership team and the ministry, so Ian Simpson, Katie Gottsman, and the excavation community, we then amended the legislation in April 2022, which required a mutual agreement between excavators and UIOs in writing. And this aimed to reduce unnecessary or invalid renegotiations in the system. And where we were 4 years ago at 39%, we are now at 15% in 2024. So every single year until now, it's actually dropped between 4 to 6% annually. So the amendment was, in my opinion, a very positive change. One thing that I do want to say is that Ontario One Call really does support the renegotiation function. I definitely see both Nadia and Rob's. I see both sides there, but we do encourage it that the renegotiation function is used. The one thing that I do want to preface though is necessary. Like it should be necessary. What we've seen in the past is there are UIOs that will try to renegotiate every request that comes in, and even if they have the bandwidth. And so what I want to put emphasis on is if you have the bandwidth, don't bog the system with renegotiations if it's not necessary. So it should only be used when necessary, and that's why it's in place. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Isabella and Valentina, do we have any questions on this topic?
We have one question, Ryan.
Let's have it.
So what if you don't have time to negotiate with a contractor when they ask for next day locates?
So if there's no time to renegotiate, then our view as in the compliance team would be that locate has to be done by the deadline, and that we would treat that as a late locate, remembering that there is an authority under the legislation to renegotiate, and we've talked about that at some length. Is that there's no such thing as an automatic renegotiation, and an excavator never needs to agree to it. So if there's not, I would say be on top of this, have systems in place, and we can provide guidance on that. But if it's late, then we would treat that as late locate. In the interest of time now, I want to move on to our next section, and that's awards and recognition. So I'd like to ask our panelists to stay with us for just a moment longer, but hand the mic over to our Chief Corporate Officer, who is, I'm sorry, not anymore, our Chief Strategy Officer, who is known to us very well on Cape Webinar. So over to you, Jean.
Thank you, Ryan. I know fancy titles, who cares, right? But I wanted to say thank you to the more than 160 professionals who've made our webinar part of your day. And so thank you again for joining us. I wanted to thank as well Nadia, Rob, and Corey for your preparation and contributions to making our webinars perhaps one of One Call's best kept secrets. I also wanted to thank my team, the rather tiny but mighty compliance and industry performance team, for their focus and adaptability in 2024. And I wanted to say this in front of your peers, Ryan. Maybe it'll make you uncomfortable, but That's life. Not only are you guys engaging with the sector through these webinars, but you're also acting like a modern regulator through transparency and accountability, evidence-based and risk-informed decision-making, proportionality in your approach, collaboration and communications, and continuous improvement in your processes, and innovation in the use of technology. These principles help ensure that regulatory bodies can effectively protect public interests while fostering a fair and efficient regulatory environment. Don't ever waver from these principles. As much pressure as you're going to get from all sides of the equation, don't waver. With that said, I am happy to participate in this year-end webinar. On behalf of One Call, I wanted to share some high-level details on an exciting new safety-oriented initiative, the introduction of our Sector Safety Awards. These awards are designed to recognize and celebrate outstanding safety leaders within our sector. At One Call, our mission has always been to promote safe digging and facilitate safe and timely excavation, all with a view to preventing damage to underground infrastructure. Safety is at the core of everything we do, and we believe that it's essential to acknowledge those who go above and beyond to ensure a safe working environment. As you know, some of our sister public safety administrative authorities recognize outstanding sector performance with their own awards. So you may have been wondering when we might be doing the same. Well, we're very pleased to let you know first, this is the group that is knowing first, just so you know, we've not sent this out otherwise, that we intend to introduce One Call Sector Safety Awards. We're going to do that at our next conference and trade show in the fall of 2025. While not all the details have been finalized, we anticipate presenting 3 to 5 sector awards. It'll depend on the nomination process, obviously. Excuse me, but these are the areas. We'd like to see a Safety Champion of the Year awarded to an organization who's shown outstanding dedication to safety practices. We'd love to see a Best Safety Innovation Award, recognizing innovative ideas or practices that may have significantly improved workplace safety. A Team Safety Excellence Award, awarded to a team that has collectively demonstrated exceptional safety performance. A Safety Improvement Award, and a Safety Leadership Award, and I know you guys know what those are. These awards will be open to all sector professionals and organizations committed to safety. Nominees will be evaluated based on their impact on safety, innovation, and leadership. Our soon-to-be-announced judging panel, comprised of industry experts and safety professionals, will carefully review each nomination to select the most deserving recipients. At the end of the day, we hope that these awards will help promote best practices and inspire others to prioritize safety in their operations. I'll just wrap up quickly, Ryan, if that's okay. In the first quarter of next year, we'll provide additional details on the nomination process, the deadlines, the categories, etc. We'll be offering these first sector safety awards at our conference and trade show sometime in the fall of 2025. The timing and details of that well, it's a combined annual meeting and conference and trade show. That should be shared very soon so everybody can put that into their calendars. Thank you very much for attending. You know, as I said, there were 160 when I started talking and 139 now. So I'm not sure what that means, Ryan, but all joking aside, I really appreciate your attention, your commitment to safety. We do look forward to receiving nominations and celebrating outstanding contributions to safety in the sector. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you want to send them in by email otherwise, but I do wish you all a safe and happy holiday season.
Jean, thank you very much for that. I suspect that folks are wanting to go to lunch now, so I want to be respectful of time. But it sounds like there are some exciting things ahead in 2025. So the panelists and the other participants in today's webinar warned me that we had too much on the agenda and we may run out of time for some components. They were right, but let me keep this page up for a moment to say that please send your questions to us, especially your scenario-based questions to us by email. The compliance team will respond to 100% of your questions, giving advice, and our interactions with the community are something that we really value. And we think that's how we can add value to the safety ecosystem within the community as well. So, having said that, today marks the end of our 2023 and 2024 webinar series. Thank you to Nadia and Rob and our other guests for joining today. Question, would you like to see these continue in 2025? And if yes, should they take the same format? Should they be a different format? Should they be more or less frequent? Perhaps we should be adding some additional time in order to have Q&As. So please put your thoughts in the comments section below, and your feedback to us really does inform our decision making. So thank you again to our panelists, and wishing everyone a very happy holiday season, a safe holiday season, and looking forward to big things in 2025. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.